The moment you stop caring is the moment everything becomes clear. People fundamentally misunderstand this state of mind. They think not caring means becoming cold, empty, or detached from the human experience. In reality, not caring is the highest form of clarity. It is the surgical removal of noise. It is the exact second you stop bleeding your vital energy into places, people, and ideas that were never going to reward you. The brutal truth is that most people are lost not because they lack intelligence, but because they care about the wrong things with religious intensity. You care about being liked by people you don't even respect. You care about being understood by those who have already committed to misjudging you. You care about what people think, while those same people aren't thinking about you at all. This constant emotional investment is the leash around your neck. You call it sensitivity. Machiavelli would call it a fatal vulnerability. Real power does not beg for validation. It moves cleanly. Power does not apologize for existing, and it certainly does not explain itself to those who cannot benefit its trajectory. Most importantly, power is not emotionally entangled with outcomes it cannot control. In the eyes of a true strategist, the one who survives is not the one who feels the most, but the one who sees the clearest. As the path ahead becomes visible, the emotional weight you carry into every decision must diminish. When you care too much, you hesitate. You overthink the simple. You soften blows that were meant to land with decisive force. You negotiate with your own fear and call it morality. But clarity does not come from moral comfort. It comes from an unflinching understanding of consequences and the courage to choose a path regardless of the emotional cost. Machiavelli never suggested cruelty for the sake of pleasure. He suggested effectiveness, and effectiveness demands total detachment. If every minor insult shakes your foundation, you will never rule anything not a business, and certainly not the territory of your own mind. The world does not reward the emotionally exposed. It exploits them. It finds the cracks in your armor where you care too much about your reputation, and it drives a wedge into those gaps until you break. Think about how often your focus fractures. A single negative comment ruins your day. A rejection replays in your head for weeks. A moment of embarrassment follows you like a shadow. This is not depth, it is captivity. Your need to care is the prison guard, and you are the one hand-delivering the keys to your cell every morning. The less you care about approval, the freer your actions become. When the need for external validation no longer dictates your moves, your entire strategy undergoes a shift. You stop trying to be impressive, and you start being precise. You stop performing, and you start positioning. You stop asking, "How will this look?" and you start asking, "What does this get me?" Most people recoil at this. They think it sounds heartless. But morality without power is fragile, and power without clarity is chaos. The person who cares too much about appearing good often ends up being the most ineffective person in the room. While they are busy polishing their halo, the person who cares about results is busy shaping reality. Caring too much makes you predictable. Your competitors know exactly what buttons to press because you have labeled them clearly with your emotional reactions. Your pride, your ego, your insecurities, they are all exposed. But when you care less, you become unreadable. Silence replaces explanation. Stillness replaces the impulse to react. Uncertainty is a potent form of power. When you no longer rush to defend yourself, accusations lose their momentum. When you no longer chase validation, manipulators lose their leverage. When you no longer explain your decisions, your critics lose oxygen. The battlefield quiets down, and in that quiet, you see the strategic lines that others miss. Clarity is cold, clean, and surgical. Most people think confidence comes from believing in yourself. Real confidence comes from the moment you realize that it is irrelevant whether others believe in you or not. The second their belief becomes a non-factor, your movement becomes unstoppable. You stop seeking permission to act. You stop outsourcing your sense of worth to a crowd that doesn't even know who they are. Machiavelli warned rulers about the trap of being loved. Love is fragile. It is a high-maintenance emotion that dissolves the moment the pressure gets too high or self-interest changes. Respect and independence are different. The leader who is not emotionally dependent on the crowd can move against that crowd if necessary. Every time you act to preserve someone else's comfort instead of your own trajectory, you tighten your own chains. The less you care about being misunderstood, the faster you move. Misunderstanding is inevitable when you are operating at a level the group cannot perceive. If you wait to be understood before you act, you will remain stagnant forever. History has no memory of those who waited for a consensus. The path becomes clearer when you stop caring about fairness. Fairness is a narrative we invent to make chaos feel manageable. But reality does not operate on a moral balance sheet. Reality rewards leverage, timing, and decisiveness. You cannot navigate a storm by screaming at the clouds because they aren't being fair. Caring too much about fairness makes you slow. Caring too much about loyalty makes you blind. Every excessive attachment is a blindfold. Detachment, however, sharpens your survival instinct. When emotion steps back, pattern recognition steps forward. You begin to notice who actually benefits from your hesitation. You do not need to destroy your empathy. You simply need to control it. Empathy without discipline is self-sabotage. Selective caring is strength. Strategic indifference is survival. The master understands that you must care deeply about your ultimate objective while remaining emotionally neutral about everything that does not serve it. That neutrality is the presence of focus. Focus is ruthless and lonely, but focus is what separates the people who move history from the people who merely comment on it. When you stop caring about the emotional comfort of others, you gain the ability to tell the truth without flinching. When you stop caring about being liked, your voice steadies. When you stop caring about the possibility of loss, risk becomes a manageable variable. The world rewards clean movement. If you want clarity, you must let go of emotional crutches. You must drop the desire to be seen as the good guy. You must drop the addiction to being included. These are the luxuries of people who are not responsible for their own outcomes. Responsibility changes you. When results are all that matter, sentimentality becomes secondary. Feelings become data points rather than directives. This is the turning point most people never reach. They cling to caring as if it is the only thing that makes them human, failing to realize that uncontrolled caring makes them manageable and weak. Strength is the absolute mastery over feeling. Once you master your internal state, the fog lifts. Decisions that used to take months now take seconds. You stop asking what feels right, and you start seeing what works. Once you see this truth, you can never unsee it. You start noticing how much of the human experience is just theater. People act not to achieve something real, but to maintain a specific image. Image is an expensive commodity. It drains your attention. The more you care about protecting your mask, the less energy you have to actually move forward. This is why those who rise quietly often rise the fastest. They aren't announcing their every move. They aren't broadcasting intentions for a hit of dopamine. They are watching, calculating, and adjusting in the shadows. Machiavelli admired this silence because silence cannot be attacked directly. Noise invites resistance. Silence forces the world to guess. The moment you stop caring about being seen as virtuous, you can finally be effective. Virtue that must be advertised is usually a mask for insecurity. True discipline is invisible. True strategy rarely feels noble in the moment. It feels isolating, and sometimes even wrong to those bound by conventional thinking. But comfort has never been a companion of progress. Caring less does not mean you abandon your values. It means you stop letting your values be weaponized against you. People will appeal to your guilt to get what they want. They will frame your hesitation as kindness to keep you in your place. If you care too much about how you are perceived, you will comply every time, calling it decency while you erase your own potential. Machiavelli warned that those who rely on the goodwill of others build on sand. Goodwill evaporates when the environment changes. Interests are permanent. When you stop trying to please everyone, you can finally identify who truly benefits from your success and who only benefits from your submission. This is where emotional detachment becomes dangerous to the people around you, not because you have become a villain, but because you are no longer controllable. You no longer jump when expectations are placed on you. You no longer feel the compulsion to justify your choices. When justification disappears, authority takes its place. Authority is an assumption, and assuming it requires a profound indifference to approval. The most influential figures in history rarely spent time explaining themselves. Explanation is a subtle form of permission seeking. When you stop caring about being understood, you reclaim the right to act without a consensus. This independence terrifies people. Humans are comfortable when the behavior of others is predictable. Caring too much makes you a known quantity, but indifference disrupts every pattern used to categorize you. People don't know where you stand, so they are forced to tread carefully. Machiavelli understood that uncertainty breeds a paralyzing caution. When others are unsure of how much you care, they hesitate to test your boundaries. That hesitation creates the space you need to move. That space creates the leverage you need to win. In your life, this looks like no longer reacting immediately. It means letting silence do the work. It means letting others reveal their intentions while you remain an unreadable fortress. When you care less about filling the silence becomes your ally. Privacy is not a form of deception, it's a strategy. Control is not a form of dishonesty, it's a necessity. You can be genuine without being vulnerable to every person you meet. Vulnerability is a resource that must be rationed. It should be shared only where it strengthens an alliance and never where it weakens your position. The person who cares indiscriminately is an open door. The person who cares selectively is a fortress. Think about how often you reveal your doubts to people who have no power to help you. Each time you do this, you are handing over information, and information is the raw material of power. The less you care about emotional reassurance, the less dependent you become. Dependency is the quiet killer of ambition. It disguises itself as connection, but it functions like a leash. Once you cut that leash, your movement becomes lighter. You stop dragging the weights of other people's opinions. You act based on the hard edges of reality rather than anticipated judgment. Emotional detachment feels like a loss before it feels like freedom. But responsibility demands distance. Distance gives you perspective. Perspective reveals patterns. Patterns inform a winning strategy. When you care less, you stop personalizing obstacles. Failure becomes feedback. Criticism becomes noise. Opposition becomes data. Nothing penetrates deeply enough to destabilize your core. In a world of flux, stability is the most attractive quality a person can possess. People gravitate toward those who do not waver. They trust the person who remains composed when everyone else is fracturing. Composure is not numbness. It is the ultimate form of restraint. And restraint is power. The clearer your path becomes, the more you realize how many distractions were masquerading as obligations. Invitations you felt you had to accept, arguments you had to win, and opinions you had to address. Caring less closes these doors automatically. You begin to conserve energy. Energy once scattered becomes concentrated. Concentration amplifies force. A focused mind cuts through complexity like a blade through silk. Machiavelli observed that fortune favors the person prepared to act decisively. Decisiveness is impossible when you are emotionally entangled with every possible outcome. You hesitate because you are weighing feelings instead of facts. When the caring variable is removed, your timing improves. Readiness is an illusion used to justify procrastination. Action creates readiness. Once you stop caring about being perfect, you allow yourself to be effective. Once you stop caring about universal approval, you allow yourself to be respected by the few who matter. Growth requires parts of your old identity to die. Identities built on pleasing others are fragile. Machiavelli would see these as liabilities. The world is not moved by intentions, it is moved by actions. Actions are cleaner and more precise when the emotional noise is turned down. You don't become less human when you care less. You become more deliberate. You choose where to invest emotion rather than leaking it everywhere. That choice separates those who drift from those who direct. Resistance from others is inevitable. They will say you've become distant. This usually means your emotional availability was serving them more than you. Observe these reactions. They reveal the dependencies you didn't know existed. The path clears because you stop engaging in battles that offer no strategic value. Many mistake indifference for arrogance, but arrogance seeks attention. Indifference ignores it. Arrogance reacts with noise. Indifference lets the insult die alone. An unanswered attack collapses. The less you care, the less leverage the world has over you. People reveal their true intentions when their manipulation no longer works. They either adapt or they leave. Both outcomes provide clarity. This is an ascent into total control. Control over your reactions, your energy, and your direction. Once that control is established, external chaos loses its power to distract. You move forward while others are still reacting. You build while others are still seeking approval. That is how the path becomes inevitable. You are no longer negotiating with the world emotionally. You are observing it. Unclouded observation reveals the structures others miss. You see incentives instead of intentions. You see outcomes instead of excuses. This is the reality Machiavelli wrote for. Not for the naive, but for those willing to accept the world as it is. He understood that the greatest danger is the comfort of illusion, the idea that effort is always rewarded or that honesty is always protected. When you care too much, you cling to these illusions. Letting go of caring forces you to let go of fantasy. Fantasy is an expensive habit. It costs you time and momentum. Once the grip of caring loosens, your mind becomes strategic. You stop asking, "Is this fair?" and start asking, "Who benefits?" You stop asking, "How do I feel?" and start asking, "What does this position me for?" These questions make you awake. Most people are sleepwalking, guided by impulse and the need to belong. Belonging is a tool of control. When you care deeply about it, you will betray your own interests to keep your seat at the table. You will shrink your soul to fit into spaces not meant for you. Caring less breaks that spell. You stop performing loyalty for groups that would never protect you. You stop internalizing blame for failures that weren't yours. This clears the mental space for ambition to grow. Ambition with clarity is lethal. Machiavelli respected ambition paired with discipline. When you care less, your ambition becomes quieter but more dangerous. You no longer seek applause before you've produced a result. You let outcomes speak for themselves. You also become impossible to manipulate. Emotional hooks no longer land. Guilt trips fall flat. This frustrates those who once relied on your reactions to manage you. They may attempt to shame you back into compliance. This is your test. If you return to your old ways out of discomfort, you give back the keys to your life. But if you remain composed, the dynamic shifts permanently. Power changes hands through the force of consistency. Power is maintained every day through restraint and the refusal to be dragged into unnecessary conflict. Conflict is a distraction disguised as an emergency. When you care less, urgency loses its grip. This clarity changes your experience of time. You stop rushing and start pacing yourself. You are no longer desperate for validation, so you can play the long game. Selective intensity is the goal. You choose which battles are worth your blood. This makes your presence heavier. People feel the weight of your focus because you are no longer leaking energy. You are contained. Containment is intimidating. It signals that you are not desperate. Machiavelli knew that stability attracts allegiance. People follow the anchor in the storm. As your internal dialogue quiets, Anxiety loses its fuel. Mental clarity is the byproduct of emotional restraint. You think straighter and recover from setbacks with terrifying speed. Failure no longer defines your identity. It informs your move. You extract the lesson without self-punishment. This is true freedom. Freedom from the need to over-explain or apologize for your existence. The ultimate goal is mastery over yourself. The world cannot be mastered if your reactions are still automatic. Automatic reactions are chains. The less you care, the fewer chains you carry. This makes your life intentional. You choose your attachments. When emotion is chosen, it is an engine. When it is uncontrolled, it is a leak. Stop sabotaging your progress with emotional excess. Stop mistaking noise for direction. The path is clear because you are finally walking it without the permission of the crowd. The final irony is that the less you care about being liked, the more you are respected. When you stop asking the world for your identity, the world starts to accept the one you've chosen. Every step becomes intentional. Every move is yours. Nothing is louder than the person who has finally stopped trying to prove themselves to anyone.